inflation is always going to be positive. We've seen inflation come down pretty strongly over the last year, back down to really within range of what the Fed's going to be comfortable with. So the Fed being on pause and inflation no longer really looking like a threat is going to be only positive for crypto in general.
Now, I've asked almost all of our markets guests this week, but economists are calling for a recession either by the end of this year or by Q1 next year. How do you think this is going to impact the crypto markets, if you think it will at all?
Well, a recession is never good for any risk asset, right? But easier money, if the Fed starts to cut, will certainly be good for both crypto and the tech ecosystem. I'm not certain, though, on some of these calls for a recession. Many of them are predicated on this gut reaction of higher rates means recession coming soon. And I don't think that's the right conditionality, although there's definitely some correlation there. We are seeing a very strong market, a very strong economy, despite the fact that rates are high. The fact that we see this low inflation and low unemployment regime, even now with rates at 5% plus, I think it's hard to say that we're going to get a recession that quickly with such a strong economy going on.
All right. And lastly, back in February, Hashnote was the first company to be launched by Web3 incubator Cumberland Labs. Hashnote is also regulated in the US by the CFTC. Where do you see the future of institutional grade decentralized finance headed?
Well, I think generally, historically, finance has been very good at ingesting new technologies. And DeFi and this whole crypto blockchain thing is going to be no different. We're seeing adoption from many of the major financial firms in a variety of ways. We've recently seen a resurgence of money market funds on chain, particularly from Franklin Templeton and the like. We see experimentations from guys like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan all the time. And so I think it's only a matter of time before we ingest all this technology and make a new financial system that's really driven by blockchain technology. And that's what we're doing at Hashnote. We think that because the future of finance is going to be driven by blockchain, having an investment manager that is blockchain first really is going to be an advantage as more and more of these assets go on chain. I think it's as inevitable as the electronification of equities markets, for example, which may have looked crazy to people in the 80s, but now we can't imagine a financial market that's not fully electronified and traded on the internet.
Anything that you think needs to change with regulation to achieve this future you just described?
Oh, almost certainly, right. That's the one thing that everyone is terrified about, particularly in the U.S. It's really a shame to see so much of the talent going abroad, as many of the other jurisdictions are actually quite positive on blockchain technology and crypto. We're seeing a lot of positive developments in Europe, post-MiCA. Hong Kong is trying hard to attract talent at this point with their new regulation. And the Middle East is very positive and very proactive in trying to attract crypto talent as well as crypto money. So I am quite optimistic still about the U.S. being able to change course. I think we have a history of making great last-minute decisions, and so we're awaiting that as we set up shop and are expecting the U.S. to eventually make the right decisions, and perhaps do so in a very cautious manner. But with the type of money at stake, I think caution is a perfectly reasonable way to enter this market.
All right, Leo, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining the show this morning, and have a great weekend.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. You have a good weekend too.
That was Hashnote CEO Leo Mizuhara. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, new details are out surrounding FTX's latest bankruptcy deadline. We'll discuss with an expert in the distressed crypto asset market next.
The State of Crypto is presented by Tron, connecting the world to the power of cryptocurrency.
Could FTX come back to life? The infamous crypto exchange is talking to investors about a relaunch. This is according to a report from the Wall Street Journal. Joining now to discuss is 507 Capital Managing Partner Thomas Brazil. Welcome to the show, Thomas.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Now, according to this Wall Street Journal report, current FTX CEO Don Ray said the company, quote, has begun the process of soliciting interested parties to the reboot of the FTX.com exchange. Talk to me about what you think about this as an FTX creditor yourself.
Yeah, I think it's good to see them following all possibilities for recoveries, whether that's through litigation and, the regular sort of what are called preferences and fraudulent transfers, and as well as marshaling assets. But then, going concern value is always more than liquidation value. So it's good to see them at least entertain the idea, even though I do still think that it would be a bit of a tall order for them to do. It's good to see this exercise happening.
Okay, you say it will be a little bit of a tall order. What do you think is the likelihood that something like this comes to fruition?
Well, it's looking increasingly more likely. So the probability has gone up over the course of the bankruptcy. But I would say it's still probably below 50% probability. If you really made me put a number, I'd probably say maybe a 20 to 30% chance. I think what the debtor is going to do is they're taking proposals from parties in the market who could actually run this business. And, if that means equity in the new company for creditors, that's fantastic. We would be supportive of anything that we think maximizes creditor recoveries. But if someone's just going to show up and run the estate and get free optionality on the back of creditors, we would not be in favor of that. So the details are very important.
I know I'm asking you to speculate a little bit here, but any inclination, any ideas who these investors might be, who these interested parties might be?
Yeah, it would be a who's who of, crypto firms. I had heard the Figment floated around. I heard the Wave Financial guys' name floated around from a few parties in the background. These are all guys that we're looking to do things with, probably with Voyager and definitely with Celsius. So it's the same parties that are, you see it in every cycle, when you have downturns, or every industry, when you have downturns and you're in a strong position, you look to consolidate and you look for business opportunities. And so it's not, it's anybody with cash and with the team to be able to potentially do this.
Yeah, everything we're talking about makes sense here. Do you think that the brand is able to revive itself?
Crypto, I guess crypto investors maybe have short memories. No, I think that if it's competently run with some capital put in by whoever the sort of plan sponsor is, in the same way that Celsius was run, their sort of plan is contemplated to be done, then we would be supportive, and I think that would be great for the estate. But yeah, again, it's still a lower probability. It's just good for the estate to see it out. I hope I answered your question there, but I rephrase if I didn't.
No, that was perfect. We introduced you as an expert here. You started buying Mt. Gox bankruptcy claims back in 2015, and 507 Capital is a major buyer of claims like FTX, like we've spoken about, 3AC and Celsius. Talk to me about the marketplace for buying and selling claims like this.
Sure. So I just a tiny bit of context. I started getting involved in Mt. Gox, and we started buying claims and have been a major buyer of claims across almost every crypto insolvency, and not just claims, but we looked at doing what are called debtor in possession loans and any sort of litigation finance or anything that might be interesting. So at the end of the day, we're in this ecosystem. We're believers long term in the ecosystem, and that's why we've put a stake in the ground that we want to be a part of these restructurings. Because long term, the ecosystem has to grow for us to benefit. So yeah, the market in general, there's a pretty active market for FTX. I would say Celsius, there's a pretty active market. Voyager, not as much, and Three Arrows, not as much. And then there are a number of tertiary dockets that people don't probably talk about that really aren't so active. But it's good. The American process for bankruptcy is great because in FTX there is a lot of disclosure, and so that allows buyers to be able to really get under the hood and understand the process of what the recoveries might be long term, and therefore offer decent compensation to people. And it also helps the seller get comfortable that they're not being hoodwinked into selling, like they feel like they know what's going on in the case. So,
I have to ask you, given your experience, about a new product that hit the market recently by 3AC founders Kyle Davies and Suzu. They launched OPNX. They're tokenizing bankruptcy claims. Do you think there's a future for a product like this?
I do. Not sure if it's the right team to be doing it, but I definitely think that the idea of tokenizing bankruptcy claims is super cool. Much less incremental than the idea of maybe a marketplace. Not there's anything wrong with a marketplace. The marketplace is fine too. But I think innovation in the restructuring space is great, and it's nice. It's unfortunate for creditors that are caught up in it, but let the competition begin for creditor assets and eyeballs to be able to monetize their claim in any way they can.
Some might say that these two co-founders understand bankruptcy better maybe than the rest of us.
Yeah, no comment. I don't know what to say to that. I wish them the best. I think it's great for creditors to have just more options. It can't hurt.
All right. I want to talk about something you tweeted yesterday. You tweeted a line item from John J. Ray's expense report. It shows the current FTX CEO is researching treasury investments and cash options. Explain what that means and why it matters.
Well, I guess if rates are at 5%, 5% on $4 billion or whatever, $3 billion, whatever the cash holdings are at this point, would be fantastic for the estate because it could help with the administrative burn. But in U.S. bankruptcy, and I'll say I'm not a lawyer. We invest in these. So I think I'm saying it right. When you're supposed to be in FDIC insured accounts, so for him to basically go and do treasury management, he'd have to motion for the court to get approval for whatever they were doing. But there is huge cash balances, and they are just sitting around. They should be invested in a conservative, but it wouldn't be wrong in a prudent, conservative way. I don't see why they wouldn't be looking at this. So it's nice to see. I think people have talked about it for a while on Twitter and other places. And look, I had the opportunity to meet John in person a few weeks back, and he was fantastically great and candid. And I think this is just more of John being John, which is trying his best to increase recoveries for creditors.
Thomas, thank you very much for joining the show today, and I hope you have a great weekend.
You too. Thanks for having me. Y'all have a good weekend.
That was 507 Capital Managing Partner Thomas Brazil. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll reveal the top places in the world to live and work in crypto, blockchain, and Web3. Find out what those are when we come back. Good morning and welcome back to First Mover on CoinDesk TV. Zug, Singapore, and London ranked the highest in CoinDesk's crypto hubs list this year, which details the best places in the world to live and work in crypto. Joining us now to discuss how these rankings came to be is the CEO and co-founder of IOMob, Boyd Cohen. Welcome to the show, Boyd.
Thank you, Jen. Nice to be here.
Wonderful to have you on this Friday morning. Now, you consulted with CoinDesk to create these rankings. Talk to us about the methodology. What went into scoring and rating these cities?
It's always a tricky prospect, and it's always going to be contentious, the results. And this was the first time we ever collaborated to build this. So it's going to be a learning process for all of us as we move on to future rankings. I actually, in the past, used to do smart cities rankings for Fast Company, and that's kind of how the conversation got started about collaborating. Worked with the team at CoinDesk over, 6 months or so, and we applied. So I have a background in academics, although I've been working in crypto now for 6 years, and have actually visited or been to events at almost all of the top 15 in our list. So I have some context. We went through kind of a blended process that's somewhat academic and then very practical. In the end, you have to be a bit practical when you do a ranking like this because there's so many different ways of capturing the data and using the data to actually try to come up with a credible ranking that people would actually, accept on its face as being a neutral, credible result. And in our case, what we did was stage one. We reached out to experts we knew globally, and we specifically sought out people in less obvious places too, so that we had a more holistic approach to this. And the first question was, name the top 20 cities in your opinion, or regions or hubs, because we'd find it as hubs. So the idea was, you never know. There are areas in the world where it's not just a city, but maybe a region or like a couple cities combined that are creating like the Silicon Valley for crypto, right? So we use that kind of process to get from subject matter experts a list of cities to start with. And then we looked for, out of the 20 or so experts that we got good responses from, we looked at where there was overlap, as in this region or hub has been named by at least two of the experts we reached out to, and that formed the basis of the starting point for the ranking, followed by a collective exercise to choose the indicators that we should select, and then find data that was accessible and acceptable to represent those indicators we wanted to capture.
Okay, so definitely a thought-out process in putting this list together. You said you visited all of the countries that
Not all, most of them.
Most of them. Any cities that you were surprised to see make the list?
Well, for sure. I mean, I think I barely knew anything about Ljubljana until we did this ranking, so that was one that surprised me. We had some that were maybe not surprising, but didn't make the final cut, that I was happy to see in the first list, but didn't make the final 15, like Lagos, Nigeria, Buenos Aires, El Salvador. Again, going to that point that I think, increasingly, and it's even interesting, some of your prior interviews today regarding sort of the regulatory environment, the approvals of ETFs in the US is kind of interesting to juxtapose. You've got the US market, which did, some people view the rankings as, well, the US did pretty well because like 6 cities in the US made the top 15. But when you look at most rankings of cities for innovation, usually the US is dominant, right? And in here, I think the first city ended up, the US city was 8th. So every other cities from around the world before US cities appeared. And that is because of the regulatory environment. Whereas you find in some of these more developing countries and cities like Lagos and others, you have a much more favorable environment. El Salvador, where they actually, of course, used Bitcoin as legal tender.
Talk to me a little bit more about how regulation played into the scoring here. We just saw a graphic that had the weights for the scorecard. How important was regulation when putting this list together?
Yeah, this was something we debated internally. I mean, obviously, any ranking, selecting indicators is already a challenge. And then deciding the weighting of those indicators is another challenge. And we had a lot of debates about it, but in the end, for us, it was just so critical, the regulatory regime, because without it, you really just don't have a solid foundation for a vibrant crypto ecosystem, whether you're a startup, whether you're a venture fund, whether you're a digital nomad. If you have a antagonistic relationship with the regulation bodies around crypto, it's really hard to have a flourishing crypto ecosystem. So, you could argue that it is surprising that there were even 6 cities from the US that made the list, or North America that made the list, given the frankly terrible regulatory environment you find in the US, compared with, and one of your previous guests just talked about it, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Hong Kong, Singapore. So many cities and regions are really taking a leadership, London, taking a leadership position on not saying we're going to regulate by enforcement, but we're actually going to embrace these kinds of initiatives, this kind of innovation around crypto. And we want to attract the world's innovators around crypto. And, there's that recent story with Andreessen launching an office in the big venture fund in London. And one of their biggest rationale was specifically the regulatory uncertainty in the US versus the certainty around it in the UK.
Wrap this up for us as we go into the weekend. What does this list of cities tell you about the state of crypto on an international stage?
What I actually kind of love about it compared to most traditional sort of innovation indices is how decentralized and democratized hubs of innovation around crypto are. I think if you looked at most tech industries, you would see more bias exclusively in the Western world, particularly Europe and North America. And what I love about crypto is, by default, by its design, it is a democratizing technology. And therefore, we're having these hubs emerge all the way down to Lagos, to El Salvador, and of course to Dubai and other markets. That's what kind of has me the most excited about the future, is that we're not like putting all our eggs in the basket of Silicon Valley, but instead seeing flourishing ecosystems all around the globe.
Boyd, thank you very much for joining the show this morning.
Thank you, Jen. My pleasure.
That was the CEO and co-founder of IOMob, Boyd Cohen. Head to CoinDesk.com to check out the rest of the cities that made our crypto hubs list this year. That's it for First Mover. I'm Jen Sanasi. Thank you so much for coming and joining us this morning. It will be off for the weekend, but back on Monday. I know it's a long weekend for most, but we'll be back right here on July 3rd. In the meantime, you can catch the hash today at noon. You're watching CoinDesk TV.
Hey there, welcome to The Hash. It's me, Zach. I got Jen Sanasi. I got Adam Levine. We're on CoinDesk TV. That's pretty cool. CoinDesk Podcast Network, also super cool. Check it out. Good stuff. We're here to talk about today's news in crypto and more, and I'm going to kick it straight to Jen for the first story of the day. Jen, what do you got?
All right, we got some more developments with FTX. According to a report by the Wall Street Journal, FTX is moving ahead with plans to restart its international exchange. CEO John J. Ray III is quoted in the article saying that the company has, quote, begun the process of soliciting interested parties to the reboot of the FTX.com exchange. Sources say the company has already had early talks with investors about different structures, including possibly a joint venture. Adam, I'm going to kick this one off to you. Seems like FTX 2.0 could be on the horizon. What do you make of this?
Well, I think it makes sense just from the perspective of if you were going to try to get value out of this brand, then this would be the way to do it. FTX, although it had a pretty abrupt fall from grace, really was a top exchange for a good amount of time, not necessarily for folks in the US. We weren't really allowed to use it, much to my chagrin at the time. But in hindsight, that turned out to be pretty all right. The reality, though, is that if they can reboot it, then there probably is substantial brand value to be had there. And that could wind up being a better way to recover, much of kind of the losses that appear to have been incurred here for folks who have funds trapped in there. It could also work out well for the company as well, because it likely would mean that not just kind of beyond the restarting, that there would be some type of equity allocation that would actually go to people who are owed money by the exchange. And so that could then allow the company to keep kind of more liquid capital and go from being something that just gets liquidated, down to nothing, to pay off what it can, to instead continuing as a going concern, which would be better for some of the parties who are involved here. So I think that it makes sense. I think ultimately it'll be hard to pull off. There's a lot of challenges around trying to reboot this type of brand in this type of situation, but it makes sense that they would try. Zach?
Yeah, a lot of people who used FTX really liked the interface, right? Liked the UX, they liked the functionality. People were fans of it. Whatever was going on behind the scenes wasn't evident to them. The massive dumpster fire that apparently was FTX and Alameda wasn't apparent to a lot of users who really sang the praises of the trading interface at FTX. So the idea that they would kind of roll out that technology certainly makes sense. I think it shows some forward thinking by John J. Ray III, JJ Ray out here launching things despite maybe some initial skepticism that this would ever come to pass. I know we expressed a lot of that skepticism on this show previously. So if this ends up being the case, I mean, yeah, hats off to him for trying to get money back into the system and pay out people who were harmed by what appears to be, or what is alleged to be, a pretty massive fraud. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I think the thing that I'm most interested in is which backers back FTX 2.0, which venture funds sign up, sign their name on the line, put their name next to the FTX brand and say, you know what, we're doing it. We're going all in. There was some fans of this product in the past, and we think we can breathe some life into it in a way that makes sense. That to me is actually going to be the interesting thing. No names were mentioned in the piece, but reportedly at least, JJ Ray is making the rounds and saying, who wants to back this thing? I'm very curious to see who that ends up being. Jen?
Yeah, the piece said that parties that want to be involved must submit indication interest by the end of this week. So if you're watching and you want to be part of this, you have until Friday. And the piece also said that Figure is allegedly interested in helping FTX restart. You'll remember that they bid on the rights to Celsius, but lost to the consortium that won that bid. So interesting. I am also very curious to see who could get behind this, but it sounds like it's probably, Adam, to your point, one of the better ways to get funds back into the hands of customers, to give customers some kind of something that can make up for what's happened over the past year with FTX. I see Will Foxley has joined us. Will, what are your thoughts on the possibility of FTX 2.0? And welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know what you guys just said, so I might just be repeating it, but that's okay. I'm going to still say it with enthusiasm. I think they should relaunch FTX 2.0. I hope they do go along with this. Why? Because there's a lot of creditors involved with this, and maybe everyone who's involved here can get some money back. We've seen all the other stories of failed exchanges, right? People get like 10 cents back on the dollar, 14 cents back on the dollar. Well, what if there's a world where FTX is able to reboot itself and pay back everyone the full amount of their money in USD terms? That's a pretty fantastic ending, though a very unlikely one. I know there's a lot of people on crypto Twitter who are pushing for FTX 2.0. They're like putting it in their bios. They're putting in like their handles saying like, we want this to occur. It's typically people who obviously lost a lot of money and are well down like the creditor stack and are unlikely to get money because all the money goes to people who had loans out to FTX or our lawyers working on the Chapter 11 case. So that's what I'm cheering for. I think there's a place for another exchange out there. Sort of like the Ledger news yesterday with the institutional trading firm that they're trying to boot up. There is a vacuum right now. After FTX left, a lot of liquidity left the market. A lot of people didn't know where to trade. Coinbase is under siege. Binance is under siege. I think it's prime time for another person to step up and build an exchange that a lot of people can use. Did I repeat anyone's talking points? How was that?
That was highly value added. Coming in
points.
blind. That was nice.
Yeah.
That was really good. It's professional.
Thank
I will
you.
say that. I wonder how regulators are going to use the narrative. I know there will be probably no validity to saying something like, FTX failed customers. there was like massive wrongdoing behind the scenes, and here we are. FTX is back again. I can see regulators saying that. I can see them using this narrative to push regulation that maybe is not favorable to the industry. Not saying it has any validity to it, but I can see that happening. Separately, customers have until the end of September to submit bankruptcy claims. So I just wanted to get that in there. If you were a customer of FTX, you should be receiving a link to submit your bankruptcy claim, and you have until the end of September to do that. That is my public service announcement to the people.
Very nice.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, cool. Let's move on to our next story. So next up, publicly listed exchange Coinbase continues to battle allegations from the U.S. securities regulator, which has accused the company of exposing users to what the SEC alleges are unregistered securities. A security, whether registered or not, is essentially a contract with obligations laid out and defined in at least basic terms. And that is the crux of Coinbase's argument for why the SEC is in the wrong here. Quote, because no such obligations are carried in the transactions over Coinbase's secondary market exchange, and because the value that Coinbase purchasers receive through these transactions adheres to the thing bought and traded rather than in the business that generated them, the transactions are not securities transactions, end quote. This is a somewhat controversial take, just because, again, in the world of cryptocurrency, there's a lot of questions about what really is a security as it relates to how we test. Zach, I'm going to throw this one to you first. Kind of what's your read on this argument? Is this a strong argument for them?
I think it's a very interesting legal tack. I think what you laid out, right, is that tokens don't guarantee an ownership stake in the projects that ostensibly launch them, right? They exist, they do their thing. There's no public disclosure requirements in terms of how these alleged securities would disclose that information to investors. So Coinbase is saying, hey, this isn't what you think it is. It does not exist within the existing purview, and you've failed to establish clear rulemaking and instead have chosen enforcement. So that I think that's honestly the crux of the argument, and is an interesting argument. It's going to be an interesting one to advance through the courts and to see if judges are sympathetic to this argument and whether or not the U.S. securities regulators have done their due diligence in trying to establish a framework for what these other things will be regulated as. Gary Gensler obviously has maintained that just because it's a new technology doesn't mean it's not going to be covered by existing securities laws. And Coinbase here is saying, no, that entire premise is wrong and faulty, and how that's all going to get arbitrated in court is going to be really fascinating. But yeah, interesting to see this as the initial volley. Wouldn't have necessarily expected that this would have been the approach, but certainly it's a strong statement. That's what I'll say. Will, I'll toss it to you.
Yeah, I actually kind of disagree with Coinbase here. I think that some tokens that they list are not securities, but some of them do fall under the parameters of what a security would be, even if they use different language and wording. Let's take, for example, a governance token. There's a lot of governance tokens listed on Coinbase. You're able to purchase them there. These governance tokens basically have one purpose. That is to govern the function of a DAO that controls the network. And these DAOs purpose is to streamline the network, adopt more users, and generally increase the price of the token. It's like a classic flywheel for these things. And that's been well known for a lot of these projects. You need that. And I actually don't disagree that that's not a good use case for these tokens. I think a governance token can have a good place. But if it quacks like a duck, I think you sort of get the picture, right? Like there could be some problems here. Now, not all the tokens that are listed on Coinbase are that. I think some of them are like that. So I sort of take a different stance. I just think like the Howey test in general is like an old, outdated law and could be changed based on the fact that, things have changed, technology has changed, and there's probably a better way of enforcing regulations than what they're doing currently. The other thing I wanted to bring up was the Coinbase. Part of this Coinbase article was talking about how they don't like the enforcement actions that have been taken to date. Quote, for years, Coinbase has voluntarily submitted to regulation by multiple overlapping regulatory bodies, has adhered to the public and limited formal guidance from the SEC, senior SEC staff, and the courts about the application of securities laws to its industry. They're basically taking another stance within this argument saying, not only do we think these securities laws are wrong, but we've tried to listen to you guys and you guys have not helped. And therefore, this whole thing should be thrown out in the first place because you're going against your own guidance, which to me is like almost like a 1-2 punch, like coming at them, but also sort of helps them in the back case that, whoever is the judge here disagrees with Coinbase and securities point, but maybe will agree with them on the fact that the SEC has not been following through with their enforcement actions in like a healthy way. Gonna throw it over to Jen.
Yeah, I think it's a good argument. And Will, to your point, I mean, there are all of these tokens that exist and there is theoretical use case for it, but then there's how people are actually using that token. And we need to take all of that information into consideration. I think what this highlights is there's the Howey test. It's been used in one way by the SEC for a really long time, but when applied to this industry, maybe there are aspects of the Howey test that are left up for interpretation, which then means the Howey test maybe is not the best tool to use if it can be left up to interpretation. And I think Coinbase's response to this shows just how it can be left to interpretation. Like we're discussing it right now. We're taking different things away from how the Howey test is being applied to different tokens that Coinbase lists. And I think that's a good thing to highlight. Zach?
I guess the question, like as it relates to Howey, is are tokens the contract to the orange farm or are tokens the oranges, right? Are tokens an investment contract, or are they just merely something that maybe was initially involved in what may have been an investment contract, and therefore it doesn't necessarily sort of comport with like these existing structures, right? And there's a lot of fuzziness and a lot of questions around that. We've seen a big debate spring up over the launch of Prometheum, which got a special purpose broker-dealer license to trade in digital asset securities, but hasn't really offered much detail into how that would actually work in terms of the investor protections and other things set forth by current regulations. So this conversation is really fascinating. For Coinbase to zig in this direction with their sort of initial statement, it's just going to make for some really interesting viewing, I think, in terms of this brewing SEC crackdown legal/regulatory fight that's obviously being played out on multiple fronts right now. So yeah, another fascinating move to see. I'll talk to Adam.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can wrap up with, I'm comfortable making a prediction here, which is to say that we're going to see this mess continue probably for another 1 or 2 years. And then I think Congress will eventually act in a way that sort of puts this to bed. I agree with the point that like Howey is the tool we have, not the tool that we need. And kind of the all of the deficiencies with that standard in kind of the modern era, close to 100 years later, I think about 90 years later at this point, like that's where the challenge comes into play here, is just that we're using a standard that was designed at a time before we understood a lot of stuff that's like on the basic science level, much less kind of the modern era of technology. And so this will eventually get solved. But in the meantime, it's kind of fertile ground for sort of these power games that these regulatory agencies play, where basically their own sort of self-aggrandizement and their importance to the current narrative. Like if the SEC wasn't focused on tokens right now and they weren't focused on cryptocurrencies, who would care about what they were doing? Who would think about what they were doing? Why would they get more money to do any of the stuff that they're doing? They wouldn't. So this is actually, again, like there's some meaningful incentive in here for them to make the argument that, hey, this is all about us and you better fund us more, right? Give us some more power so that we can protect you from this, even if that's not really the fit. But the beat goes on.
And the beat goes on into the break. We're going to take a break and we're going to talk about some other stuff, including the MFers NFT collection at Lowe's. Can we even say that? MFers at Lowe's on Flag. That's kind of an interesting development in the world of NFTs. We'll talk about that with someone involved in the project and more on the flip side of this short break. Stick with us. It's The Hash.
And welcome back to The Hash. Are you a fan of lawn art and NFTs? Well, this segment is exactly for you. We're talking about MFers, which is a new project that integrated with Lowe's in order to put the MFers PFP on lawn art. Pretty interesting development here. We have Matt Varnell of Total Marketing Web3 joining us now to talk about it all. Matt, first of all, welcome to the show. And second of all, how did you get Lowe's to go along with this? Interesting development for the NFT space.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Very excited to talk about the project. My IRL job is product development, marketing, sourcing. I've been calling on Lowe's and other big box retailers for about 18 years now. So, it was a match made in heaven. Been a Bitcoin guy going back to slightly late, but about 2020. That transitioned into NFTs, discovered the MFers. What really intrigued me about the project was the CC0 aspect of it, to where it's essentially public domain. Satoshi, when he put out the project, did so in the manner where MFers can do what they want with it. So you can take it, you can put it on product. It's open to anyone to use that for whatever means they see necessary.
Okay, I have to ask you, does Lowe's know what MFers is? Like, how did this conversation happen? How did you get the flag to be sold on the Lowe's website?
So if you go into a Lowe's store today and you shop garden flags, I'm actually responsible for their everyday seasonal business, right? So there's a line of communication already established there. This transitions from season to season. You have your holiday winter, you go into spring, summer, so it just fall and then kind of circles back around. So that line of communication was there. I'm constantly having meetings with the merchant team. This idea to sort of test the theory of, can Web3 help push, whether it's the marketing, the sales, the engagement, in the right direction. It basically took them trusting me, believe it or not, to make this thing work. The buyer himself didn't have a history in NFTs, crypto, so to speak. So basically, I said, trust me on this one. Let's see what happens. This is a test, and I got the green light. So yeah, it was a lot of selling on my side, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, so that makes total sense to me as far as how this would happen. Thank you for the additional context on that. I'm super curious about the CC0 connection here, kind of in all of this stuff. Again, like CC0 is something that's been getting trendy sort of in the world of NFTs. Sure. And basically it means that the owners retain no rights and anybody can really do whatever they want. That seems like that's kind of a double-edged sword though. And can you talk about how you're thinking about kind of the CC0 component and whether this is something that you would look to be doing more in the future, perhaps with other brands?
Yes, I would say absolutely. From our perspective, it's more about the entire community of MFers and NFTs really as a whole from the CC0 standpoint, right? So what we've discovered is it's almost like a built-in marketing team of devout supporters of not only the MFer project, but NFTs as a whole. And the sort of guerrilla marketing that's happened with Twitter specifically it was somewhat unexpected, to be honest with you, but we've kind of flipped the narrative to where now the consumer becomes the marketer. So, I mean, we're all over Twitter at this point with people finally this week receiving the product in the mail, putting it out there. And so it's from the CC0 aspect, there's no licensing fees. I mean, I've worked with Disney, I've worked with other, big brands in the past where there is a hefty licensing fee there. So really it was an experiment. Can we bridge Web 2 with Web 3 and see if this CC0 thing can actually fly?
Flag pun. That was nice. Good work.
Correct.
Yeah, so I think Web3 is sort of famously small relative to like mass market numbers, right? If you look at like people who are interacting with the Ethereum blockchain or the people who are transacting on OpenSea on a monthly basis, it's still in the tens of thousands relative to the millions, the volume that mass retailers are looking for. So I guess my question is, how is this interest leading to sales? How's it going so far? And what does like the total addressable market look like for this particular product?
So yeah, you're exactly right. So I've sold Lowe's everything from vanities to closet systems, decorative hardware, functional hardware, seasonal product, and the numbers are astronomical. There's tens of thousands of containers that we're shipping in on an annual basis into the Lowe's supply chain. With that being said, you're exactly right. I mean, there's only 5,000 active wallets that are actually trading NFTs at this point. What I thought would happen, and what actually did happen, is the idea that the engagement from Lowe's side. So they have their Twitter account, right? And it's not the most exciting account going, as most big box retailers, Home Depot, same story. They have gotten probably 100x plus engagement just within this Web3 community. So outside of selling the product, what we've discovered is it's really become a very, very strong marketing play for these guys. And they're seeing that the analytics from their engagement, it looks like a hockey stick. It's gone straight up. So that's where they see the benefit of partnering with us and doing something here. It's more about the engagement and and just the pure marketing aspect of it.
Got it. We are going to leave it there. I have to ask, if we worked it out, could we get like a hash garden flag going? Could we get all of us on a flag in a Lowe's?
Well, to be honest with you, this is not just a one-off situation. It's called seasonal MFers, and so this is edition 1. Season 1, edition 1. We have a Halloween flag, which of course will feature the zombie MFer on it. We have a holiday flag in the works. We have a winter flag in the works. In between, because I'm also a memes maxi, we're gonna put out one of these 6529 Freedom to Transact, and that's going to happen, I'd say, in the next 6 to 8 weeks, somewhere in there. So this is going to be an ongoing project for us. So we're going to have new designs, new product. All of these are limited. So the initial CC0 summer flag is only 1,000. There is an NFT tied to it as well. The packaging we put together, I'm not sure you guys probably haven't seen it on Twitter, but it's a full unboxing experience. Nice color sleeve, embossed rigid box, QR code. I mean, it's top notch.
Save the full pitch for when we're on it. So you're saying there's a chance that we could be on a flag. Is that what you're saying?
I just want my face.
No.
Get rid of everyone else.
It's got to be a team activity. We can
have a conversation.
I'll text you.
Man,
we'll be talking.
Yeah. All right. And by the way, shout out to my partner, Stephen Thompson, on this, S. Thompson on Twitter. Unfortunately, he couldn't join us. We had to pick one of the two guys to come on, but he's been a big part of this thing too. So, and much love to my MFer community.
All right. Fair enough. Well, thank you, Matt Varnell, for joining us and talking about this. Yeah, appreciate it. We'll talk to you later about our flag. All right. That's going to be it for the show today. We're going to wrap it there. That was a fun conversation. We will be back tomorrow talking about more crypto news. I am Zach Seward. We got Jen Sanasi. We got Adam Levine. We got Will Foxley for now, but that stunt right there, I don't know. We might need to boot him off the hash.
I'm getting me a long flag, boys.
There we go. Special edition Foxley print. It's going to be hot. All right. That's it for the show today. Thanks so much. Check us out on the podcast network. Check us out on Coindesk.com. A lot of great stories there, as always. We'll talk to you soon, I'm sure. Thanks for being here. Bye.
Good morning and welcome to First Mover, your first global look at today's action in Bitcoin, blockchain, and digital assets. I'm your host, Jen Sanasi, here with my co-host with the most, Lawrence Lewitton, content director at The Tie. Let's take a look at what's going on in markets before we get into the show. The CoinDesk Bitcoin price XBX index is at 30,617, up exactly 1.7% in the last 24 hours, holding steady above 30. 30K. Let's see what Ether's doing. The CoinDesk Ether price ETX index is at 1,865, up almost 1%. And let's see if DeFi assets are following suit. The DFX CoinDesk DeFi index is up, surprise, almost 1% at 105.37. All right, we are getting right into our first guest this morning. Damus has received the green light to stay on Apple's App Store. This comes after a 2-week battle that started when the tech giant threatened to remove the Bitcoin-friendly social media app for violating in-app purchase guidelines. Joining us now is Damus founder Will Kasserin. Will, thanks for joining us.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey.
Good. Thanks for taking the time to be with us this morning. Why don't you briefly talk us through this journey? There's been a bit of back and forth between Damus and Apple. Tell us where it started and how we ended up where we are today.
Yeah, so initially there was a battle to even get on the App Store. It required me to probably post it multiple times. It took like weeks. Eventually I got on the App Store, but as of 2 weeks ago, they basically told me that we're going to remove your app from the App Store if you don't remove this tipping functionality, which kind of sucked because it was a big part of the app. It's a big part of what makes Damus special. So I pushed a new version. They said it wasn't good enough, and so I was at the point where I just basically had to remove tipping altogether.
What exactly about the tipping aspect did they say was the problem?
Yeah, so their guideline is kind of confusing because it says if the tip is ever used to unlock digital content, then it's not allowed. So in Damus, digital content is never unlocked. You only ever tip after the post is made. So I just found it very confusing, and I felt like they were kind of abusing that guideline. But then they had multiple calls with them, and they said their main issue was just the fact that button is on the post. They do not want Bitcoin tipping to be associated with digital content at all, whether it's unlocked or not.
Well, I think a few days ago, we got an update that you updated the app and Apple was still going to delist it. And now we hear that you finally have approval. What happened in those last moments?
Yeah, so I thought I was trying to appease the guidelines by making it very clear that you're not actually tipping the content when you click the button. So I updated the button to tip the profile. But they said not even that's, they just don't want it. They basically want to make it hard for people to use this feature because they don't want content tipping to take off of Bitcoin. So even if I felt like I was following their guidelines, I said it still wasn't good. So I was just forced to remove it from the post altogether. You can still you can still tip from the profile, like on Twitter. Twitter does this as well. But this calls into question a lot of other Bitcoin apps on the App Store, such as like Fountain or like these podcasting 2.0 value for value apps. Like technically those aren't even allowed given what they told me. So it kind of worries me that a lot of Bitcoin apps are going to be at risk now.
So a couple of things. Did you is this specifically because it was tipped in Bitcoin? I mean, if you used, let's say, Apple Pay to tip, would they have been fine with that? And second of all, did you point out, did you say to them, look, you have these other apps that do the same thing. Why am I getting heat?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do that because I didn't want to call them out and put them at risk. But I did think about. I know. I guess yeah. Now I did it. I just want to do it during the review. It's thanks, true though. Yeah. So this idea of using in-app purchases, well, in-app purchases, you can't use that for peer-to-peer tipping to anyone, like censorship resistant tipping to anyone in the world. So even if I wanted to use in-app purchases, I couldn't for this particular use case. That's what makes it interesting. So I really think that Apple should think different and embrace Bitcoin and maybe think about integrating Bitcoin. And they should be embracing it, not fighting it. It's an open protocol, so why not? They could do it and bring Apple Pay to the entire planet.
There's nobody there that you're like talking to. There's no like individual. Like, is there like a customer service rep that you have a kind of a business development person, somebody, a human being, not an AI?
Yeah, so the people I was talking to is just the App Store reviewers who are very strict on these guidelines. It wasn't any like high level business person who's looking to integrate Bitcoin. I think that's going to need to be another conversation.
You can talk to their manager, go full Karen.
No, it's just trying to stay on the App Store, and then maybe I'll pick my battle and do another fight later on. But I just want to keep it on the App Store because apparently it's much harder to get on after you're removed. So.
this battle between Apple and Web3 isn't one that's unique to the Bitcoin space. We hear a lot about Web3 gaming apps that have been deplatformed by Apple or looking at, alternatives because they are experiencing some of the same issues with you. Going through this process, what's your outlook as it pertains to like Web3 apps, crypto apps, and major players like Apple who kind of really control whether or not people use your product?
Yeah, I mean, so we're building all this tech on open protocols. So, this tech works. You can still receive tips from other people from like Android on Damus. So like it's going to be a hard battle if they want to fight like open protocols that are censorship resistant. So I think what they're going to find is they're just going to keep losing more and more customers, and they're going to move to these other platforms that support these protocols in detail. So I think they're just going to eventually they either join us or they lose.
And what's the timeline for that? Because, I mean, if we look at how many customers Apple have right now, it is the majority of the market, right? And once you have one Apple product, it's very likely you have many more because Apple just makes your life very convenient. If you think Apple's going to start losing customers and they're going to start coming to the decentralized side, the dark side maybe, what's your, when do you think that's going to happen?
Like the optimist is like, oh yeah, this is definitely going to happen, being a big Bitcoiner. But in reality, it's exactly what you say. Like it's hard, it's going to take a long time to convince people that Bitcoin is the way forward. So yeah, it might just be like I just have a dumbed down version of my app on the App Store app, and then I work on other Android versions and desktop versions. That looks like that's going to be my path, but it's kind of sad that it's always going to be nerfed in some sense on the App Store.
So do you consider this a win or a small win for your app and I guess the rest of the industry?
I mean, the PR has been pretty crazy. So like, just the people seem really excited. People really care about what's being built here, like in these decentralized protocols, these decentralized social protocols with Bitcoin integrated. So you can just feel a lot of that passion. So I feel like it's a win just because it's getting the word out there. Like this is what Apple's doing. Maybe we should be fighting this. And then it's a big of a part of a bigger battle that we're fighting. And I think overall it's good just getting the news out.
I do want to ask about how many downloads have you had compared to pre-fight with Apple? I mean, what's been the uptick in downloads that you've had for your apps?
Yeah, so it feels like whenever I get in a fight with Apple, it just like there's all these news articles that get written, and I get huge bursts of users join. So in the past week, we've gotten like 20 to 30,000 downloads, which has been pretty cool. So yeah, I mean, yeah.
You're like the Meghan and Harry of crypto right now, getting into fights and getting down. So that's good. If you have any other feuds, I mean, you do you plan any other feuds anytime soon?
I mean, I don't go out of my way to pick, fights. I just feel like really upset when I feel like Apple's boot is under me, and I just want to build cool stuff, right? So yeah, so I'll always express my unhappiness to the social verse when they do stuff like this.
You don't want to say anything about Elon Musk?
I think Elon Musk is on my team on this one. He probably wants to add tipping to Twitter as well. And this is probably, I noticed he was commenting on a couple of threads by Tim Sweeney on the same topic. So I think we're all in the same fight, even though we're kind of competitors.
All right, Will. Well, continue rallying the troops. Thank you for joining us this morning.
All right, cheers. Thanks, guys.
That was Damus founder Will Kasserin. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll be looking at the crypto markets as Bitcoin holds firm above $30,000. We'll see you soon.
Following investor excitement over spot Bitcoin ETF filing by BlackRock and Wisdom Tree and Invesco and everyone else, it seems, Bitcoin has kind of stayed flat over the past few days. It's hovering around the $30,000 mark. That might not be by accident. Joining us now to discuss is Tasty Crypto head Ryan Grace. It's a new title, Ryan, right? Welcome.
Hey, good morning. Yeah, we have changed some names around with our corporate structure, so things are moving, but it's nice to see you.
Good seeing you. I was going to call you Tasty Crypto, head of crypto, but then I was just like, oh, that's not, you're actually the head of Tasty Crypto head.
Tasty Digital Assets.
It's kind of a very weird, yeah.
Well, we'll work on that.
Yeah. Get in touch with marketing there. Crypto spring, right? Green shoots coming out of the ground. Green shoots all over the candlesticks. What's going on? What are you seeing happening here?
Yeah, it feels a lot better. It's encouraging, I think, at this point. That said, I'm still not convinced that we've completely decoupled from some of those more macro drivers. Whether that's monetary policy, it's the idea that the economy is slowing. I don't think we're completely out of the woods just yet. But given the recent news, let's call it the institutional stamp of approval, super encouraging. Would love to see a break out of this range. But just given where we are this year, given how the market has been trading, I think anything in the short term that might be related to another Fed hike, or maybe inflation isn't coming down as fast as we thought or we would like it to, I see those now more as buying opportunities. You have to respect the range. At Tasty, we look at things through the lens of the derivatives markets, through implied volatility. And with about a 60% vol here, you've got kind of a 1 week range that you could see maybe 27.5. So you still trade that 25 to 30 range for now. But I think that you look at some of these pullbacks, if you get them, as opportunities, because it is a lot more encouraging given the institutional stamp of approval we've seen.
We have this $30,000 level here, and that's significant because we have a lot of puts and really a lot of calls hanging around there that expire tomorrow. Tomorrow's the big day, end of quarter, end of half, end of the month. Everybody's excited. I know I've marked my calendars for months in advance for tomorrow. But this is, it's significant. Is that what's keeping prices, at least for now, at that, you have like $5 billion or so on Deribit hanging out there at the 30,000, in notional there. Is that what's keeping everyone around this level for now? And do things get exciting after Friday?
Yeah, I think there's a potential for the market to move a little bit more after Friday. You see a similar dynamic in traditional markets when you look at derivatives positioning, you look at option positioning or those expirations. Granted, those markets are much, much bigger than what we see in the derivatives market here in crypto or with Bitcoin. But there is something to that, not to necessarily get into the weeds with some of the gamma dynamics or how dealers might hedge that or where those positions are. It does have an impact. So it's possible we could see a little bit more volatility. We could see kind of a quote unquote unpinning after we get through this expiration. But I think you're seeing 30,000 hold because of what's developed in the market recently over the last couple of weeks. People are encouraged. I think you have some element to trying to front run the possibility of those flows that you would see subsequently from an ETF approval. A lot of that does, again, hinge on the approval that the industry has not been able to get yet. But should you see that, I think it's over the kind of the medium term, it's off to the races. And that's why I think you're seeing buyers step in here when you get these back.
Economists have been calling for a recession for a few years now, and it seems like that call is getting closer and closer. Some economists are saying by the end of the year, some are saying by Q1 next year. Does that change your outlook here on Bitcoin, which it sounds like is pretty positive?
Yeah, my outlook's definitely positive, but I don't think that you can ignore what we're seeing when we look at the yield curve. What we are seeing when we look at some indicators of what's happening in the economy, there definitely are some concerns. I think you have to respect that. That said, very difficult to time. I look at 2s, 10s, look at the yield curve, for example. It's extremely inverted, close to one of the the largest inversions on record. Now, that has been the majority of the time, it's been a pretty good indication that there's a recession coming. That said, it's a really wide spread, 6 months to 24 months. We're about a year in since we first were inverted, and we kind of flirted with recession, technically, I suppose, when you look at GDP quarter over quarter. But tough to say. So that still kind of weighs on this. It's in the back of my mind. I think interest rate hikes here out of the Fed, whether you get another one in July, which looks like what the market's pricing in, probably matter less. Inflation is coming down, but I don't think that crypto is immune from, a sort of environment where you would see a very strong dollar, where you would see just generally a risk-off kind of sentiment in the markets. And given just how quickly we've increased interest rates here in the United States and really globally as well, when you look at global central banks, there still is that monetary policy lag. I don't think we've necessarily seen it show up. We haven't seen financial conditions tighten to the extent that they might after we're done with rate hikes. And again, that kind of coincides with that same time period that we've seen with interest rate yield curve inversions, 6 to 24 months. So we just haven't seen it yet. So I think you have to be aware of that.
Nonetheless, I mean, we are hearing that banks are tightening their lending policies. They're making it harder. There's fewer dollars sloshing around in the economy. It's like 10% down. M1 is 10% down. We're seeing, as you said, the inverted yield curve. I mean, everything's pointing to a pretty lousy recession coming up. And do you think that will, this is kind of going to be one of the first major, this is definitely the first time we've had Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies go through a period of real serious tightening of money supply, et cetera. Is that equation underestimated, do you think? Do you think that crypto markets aren't necessarily counting in the fact that it's not the same as it was? Our money supply is down over the past year. Do you think that they're not really thinking it through?
Yeah, I don't think it's very forward-looking in that sense, but I would apply the same view to what we're seeing in the equity markets. We've seen a risk-on rally here for one reason or another. And yes, I do think that if we should see a continued slowing in the economy, coupled with where we are with interest rates here, then you likely will see some short-term pain. I tend to view that as an opportunity because I think on the other side of that, and maybe this is the larger driver, when you think about the flows, we can talk about the ETF, but when you really think about the liquidity perspective, if we do get into that situation, well, the Federal Reserve and all the global central banks have that playbook. And I find it really hard to believe that we are done stimulating, that we're done devaluing currencies, fiat currencies globally. I think this trend continues, and that's really what drives, Bitcoin adoption as a, let's say an inflation hedge or a debasement hedge, and just largely crypto over time in terms of the price action. I think it's when the Fed puts the pedal to the floor again, and you'll see that should things get bad enough in the economy.
Ryan, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
That was Tasty Crypto Head, Ryan Grace. All right, we're going to continue talking about the markets, and we're going to head on over to Bitcoin Cash, which surged to a fresh one-year high on Monday, more than doubling in value in the week since it was listed on EDX markets. But is this really sustainable, Lawrence? You've been compiling some pretty interesting data over at the TIE. Break down what you found for me.
Yeah, this has been kind of a fun thing, I have to say, because Bitcoin Cash is definitely one of those currencies we don't talk a lot about here on First Mover or even CoinDesk. It comes up every now and then. It has this cult following. I'm sorry, folks. I'm going to get the angry emails. I'm going to get the angry tweets. It's okay. I love you all. But, Bitcoin Cash has kind of a cult following. It also has a strong following with people. Definitely, I know a couple of years ago, I had a lot of friends who were, loved the use of Bitcoin Cash on things like Shopify or whatever they could do. They or not Shopify, but they were using Bitcoin Cash to transact. And you take a look. There's this chart here. This is over since June 21st, when it was announced that Bitcoin Cash was going to be tradable on EDX, which we had the CEO on. And you see it just soared. I mean, none of the other coins that were on Bitcoin, that are on EDX, took off the way the way Bitcoin Cash did. It's just been a phenomenal return. We'll take a look at we have some other charts here. I think see, so do we have another one there? Yeah, take a look at that. So Jen,
That is wild.
Yeah, that I want you to see what that is. So that's big. That's Bitcoin Cash over the past year, and it's just been kind of stuck in this range. To be sure, it's a wide range, right? It was not a small range. We're looking at, I don't know, I'm trying to see here right now. We were at like 90 to 140, roughly, for about a year. Now you see that little E that stands for event. On the tie, you can tie, you can combine news events with a chart, and you could actually graph it. And in this case, I graphed the news event of the EDX announcement. Not that they launched, not that it exists, but that they just started trading, and Bitcoin Cash was there. And then all of a sudden just took off. By the way, that chart is old. It's actually even higher now. So that tells you, like, even over the past 24 hours, now over 240. So when I sent that chart in, that's a lot has happened since then.
Yeah, we don't see charts like that often, and we're talking about the sustainability of this pump, right? So EDX Markets launched Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin, Ether, Litecoin on their platform. If we see other platforms follow suit, do you think that we could see another big pump in Bitcoin Cash? Like, is this sustainable? What's the long-term outlook here?
I don't know. And this is the thing. As I mentioned before, Bitcoin Cash has this like. It was a beautiful combination of things. It has this like religious following, and we've talked to Litecoin is also on this, right? Litecoin didn't have this kind of result. There's another chart I want to show you, and this is kind of what happened in the markets. This is thanks to Josh Frank, he the CEO of the TIE, who he was playing around with this chart. He loves this chart. And he sent it over to me. I think we have it's open interest and liquidations, and this is fascinating because so then all of a sudden with this news coming out, boom, all these short liquidations started happening. Those are those green lines there, and you had some red lines there too. To be sure, those are long liquidations. People were taking on these sizable positions here, and it went from and just looking at the long liquidations, short liquidations. Now, you went in dollar terms $76 million on June 20th, right? Which was a lot. And then I'm sorry. This is I apologize. You had a $21 million in total liquidations. This is over 7 days, 8 days, when over in the past it was like a few $1,000s. And then our open interest went from $76 million to nearly 500 million, about 450, 500, close to 500 by yesterday. And what's interesting in that is this. Okay, so when you do it by dollar terms, it's obviously you've doubled the price, but you've also increased the amount of contracts. So there's been like 4x the amount or it's now 4x the amount of contracts that are out on Bitcoin Cash than were out a few days ago. This is just a very unique thing. It seems to be isolated in Bitcoin Cash, and you see it spilling. I have another chart here. This is a chart from you're looking at Binance here. This is the Binance's. I think we're going to call it up here. This is basically the volume traded on Binance. Now, what's interesting here is you have to go back about a couple of years before you saw trades that in terms of on Binance. And Binance centralized exchange. It's not EDX. It's not any of that, right? But it still saw itself a lot of volume, not seen in 2 years. It was very exciting all across the board, not just with one exchange. But remember, EDX is a small exchange. Binance, a very big exchange. These numbers, not phenomenal, but for Bitcoin Cash, incredible. This is like, they can't believe it. But I kind of want you to think about this other chart that I have here. This is... Look, before everyone gets excited about Bitcoin Cash, and I have friends who love Bitcoin Cash, I got it. All right.
People are already excited about Bitcoin Cash, Lawrence. Maybe it's a little late.
Well, it's beyond that. Take a look at this puppy, this thing. Now, all you hodlers out there, you know what I'm talking about, right? There's no replacement for Bitcoin other than Bitcoin. I know Bitcoin Cash people say there is only one Bitcoin, that's Bitcoin Cash. Okay, I've heard those arguments, but look at the chart here. That's since the start of the decade, 2020, January 1st, 2020. Look at Bitcoin. It skyrocketed. Bitcoin Cash sort of followed afterwards. Bitcoin Cash sold off with Bitcoin, and it never really came back. Bitcoin itself, it's now what is it? We're now like 4x since the beginning of 2020. Bitcoin Cash, just about where it started. It's not that exciting in that terms. And then if you look at finally, you want to look at the overall ecosystem to kind of think of just how big Bitcoin is. Now, these are crypto. So this is a basket of cryptocurrencies tracked by the TIE. So it's Bitcoin is the dominant one. We don't list Ether here. Ether gets listed with the layer ones. This is sort of just sole cryptocurrencies. Number 5, Bitcoin. So it's Bitcoin Cash. It's still small. It's a little guy. It's doing its best. People like using it here and there for transactions. It's not taking over the world. And I kind of want to remind everyone what was said on here. It was actually on First Mover. We asked the CEO of Jamil Nazar Ali of EDX Markets, and we said, okay, why Bitcoin Cash? And he said, look, he said there wasn't a high demand for Bitcoin Cash. It had nothing to do with people saying we need Bitcoin Cash to trade. It was simply because it was a derivative of Bitcoin, and it was one of the few currencies that they knew would not get in trouble with the SEC. So that's kind of what that whole thing was about. It wasn't about demand. It wasn't about institutional demand. Yes, now there's one more place for it to happen, but overall, the demand still isn't quite there. So I would be very cautious right now of people jumping into this frenzy, whether or not this thing is sustainable, because it ended up on this EDX market solely because of features, but it didn't happen because of demand, and that is something you should all be careful about going forward.
All right, Lawrence, thank you so much for putting those charts together for us and painting that picture. I'd say the takeaway is Bitcoin Cash is not the same as Bitcoin here.
Don't tweet me. Please. She said it, not me.
That's part of the job, Lawrence. You're going to get tweeted at, and you just got to take it. We're going to take a short break. Coming up, 6Clover CEO joins CoinDesk to discuss its newly announced cross-border crypto payment system. Stick with us. Good morning and welcome back to First Mover. Digital payment company Six Clovers is launching a new Web3 cross-border crypto payment system called the Versal Network. Joining us now is Six Clovers co-founder and CEO Jim Nguyen. Welcome, Jim.
Hi.
All right, let's talk about the network. This is going to allow companies to transact in stable coins and CBDCs. Tell us about your mission.
Great. Our mission is to evolve cross-border payments to support new asset types, which is stablecoins and CBDCs. We enable business to connect to each other and transact in digital currency. We see that, in the current world today, companies are moving fiat based on existing rails, but as new assets come about, digital assets such as stablecoins and CBDCs, it will require a new payments infrastructure, and that's what we're building. We're building payments infrastructure to move digital assets, particularly stablecoins and CBDCs.
Are you working with any governments or stablecoin issuers right now?
We are working with stablecoin issuers, but not with governments.
Which issuers?
We're working with both USDC as well as USDT, Circle and Tether. Yes.
And who actually is using the system right now? You just launched, I know, but exactly, is it set up? Is it up and live? And who's using it?
It's up in the system today, and we're working with companies like payment service providers, as well as businesses to transact in digital currency. So it's the same business that move fiat today for their customers. We work with those folks to expand their capabilities. As you know, payment fintechs today use existing rails, whether it's ACH, SWIFT, or SEPA, to move fiat. They want to expand to new asset types, and then that's where they're integrating with us to be able to send stable coins.
And this is built on the SWI blockchain. Why that one?
Yeah, so we're a multi-chain. Versal Network is a multi-chain product. We just launched today on the SWI. We want to give interoperability is a really key issue right now. Right, so we want to make sure that we want to give the consumers as well as businesses a choice. So if you want to send an asset on a certain blockchain, we want to be able to support that. So having high performance blockchains on our network is critical to that interoperability vision of ours.
So you guys have been fairly quiet over the past couple of years. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I mean, you've been kind of under the radar. I don't think you guys have even so much as sent out a tweet in 2 years. What happened? Yeah. Like what was going on internally? Were any internal changes? Anything happen in the interim?
No, there's no internal changes. Building payments is a difficult process. We wanted to really, we're building a enterprise-grade payments infrastructure that's compliant, right? And building systems like that does not come overnight. It requires, not only do you have to take care of existing Web 2 requirements, but also we have to tackle the Web 3 challenges, right? Multiple blockchains, multiple assets, interoperability. How do you make all that work together, right? It's launching a website where you have images is very different, but these systems need to be really hardened and they need to be tested. So we've been deep in build mode, and you should hear some more news from us coming out soon.
On the interoperability piece, any security challenges you're facing as you think about this multi-chain interoperable future for the company?
Security is top of mind for us all the time. We've designed the system to, really reduce the attacks and surface area. But that's something that's constantly on our mind. Fintech, it's very interesting. Fintech is really, we want to be at the, on the far right, which is the most innovative solution, but also on the far left, which is reliable and secure. So where we have to balance is, hey, oftentimes we may have to, really dial back on innovation to really afford security as well as reliability, right? So that's what we focus our time on right now.
Now, you guys, of course, you're probably not the first in this space. Everyone always wants to say they're the first in everything, but of course, you're not the first here. And you also have the big players like MasterCard coming in, looking to do kind of a payment system using, a tokenized bank and deposits, and you have all sorts of things. So, what's your take here? How do you see yourselves competing with these very well funded large players? What are you offering that's different, and are you looking to even be an acquisition target?
That's a great question. So, we fintechs, while there are multiple players in the space, we sit at the very lowest level in the stack, so to say. So our technology can be embedded into any company that wants to move digital assets, stablecoins, right? So at that level where, we can work with MasterCard or Visa and folks like that. So, our goal here is really to be additive to the fintech community as a whole, and then really, as well as really creating a differentiation. In terms of where we see fit is with there are various use cases that we focus on, and those cases are really about how do we enable cross-border payments fast, cheap, and really reliable, and really auditable on-chain audits. Those are the things that's not available in the past, and that's what we want to do here at Six Clovers.
Jim, thank you very much for joining us this morning, and congratulations on the launch.
Great. Thank you.
That was Six Clovers co-founder and CEO, Jim Nguyen.
The State of Crypto is presented by Tron, connecting the world to the power of cryptocurrency.
In its first legal response to the SEC's lawsuit, Coinbase claims that crypto assets listed on its platform do not fall under the regulator's jurisdiction. Well, joining us now to discuss is Coindesk Global Policy and Regulation Managing Editor Nick Day, who is also the editor of God's favorite newsletter, Coindesk Crypto, State of Crypto newsletter. Good morning, Nick.
Good morning.
Okay. What's going on? Real quickly, because I chatted too much in the previous segment, walk through the Coinbase's response to the SEC lawsuit.
Yeah, so early this morning, Coinbase filed its response. It filed an answer to the complaint to the SEC, basically going on a point-by-point list through every paragraph of the SEC complaint, and then either saying, okay, here's what the reality is according to Coinbase, or we don't admit to any wrongdoing, or things like that. It's a tactic we've seen from previous crypto companies, including Kick, and I think Ripple did that as well back in the day. But basically, the gist of it is Coinbase is alleging that the SEC A, has done no rulemaking, B, has had public officials acknowledge that there might be a regulatory gap for crypto assets, noting that Congress is looking at it and pointing to statements by Chair Gary Gensler in the past, indicating that perhaps the SEC doesn't have jurisdiction over cryptocurrencies. And it's using these arguments to say that the SEC cannot have brought a lawsuit against a crypto exchange. Other complaints include, they're claiming a lack of due process and, question about the major questions doctrine. So basically kind of tying up everything we see in public statements into one neat little package for the court.
Coinbase alleged that in another document that the regulator violated its due process. Just unpack what that means for us. What are they getting at here?
Right. So this kind of goes back to the allegations that the SEC is overstepping here, but Coinbase is arguing that the SEC has had numerous opportunities to interact with Coinbase, that Coinbase has sought regulatory guidance and such, and the lawsuit came as almost a surprise to them, or at least a Wells notice back in March.
Nick, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Always a pleasure. That was CoinDesk Global Policy and Regulation Managing Editor Nick Day. Lawrence, that's a wrap for First Mover today.
Yeah.
Thank you to our audience. Thank you to you for joining me. We will be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. You're watching CoinDesk TV.
The Chevy RS family of SUVs has it all. Whether you want the 10.2-inch diagonal color touchscreen standard on Blazer or extra peace of mind with Chevy Safety Assist, take your pick. The choice is yours. Find new roads at your local Chevy dealer.
The start of the Oasis special event. I'm Elena, and it's my great pleasure to be the MC for this event. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much. Okay, so to mark the opening, please welcoming the director of Oasis, Leo Matsubara.
こんばんは. Welcome to Oasis special event, and thank you for coming tonight. And let me say thank you for all of our backers and our partners. And this is my greatest honor to stand here, as Nijojo is a castle that watched over the tradition of the Japanese history. And we hope that this will be the turning point for Japan to regain the strengths with the highest quality of the culture power in the Web3 era. As you see, the Oasis launched a new visual identity. It's more simple and expressing more fun of games. And let me explain what's Oasis. Oasis is a blockchain for gamer and game developers. We remember blockchain game was killed during the DeFi summer in 2020. We need blockchain for gamer and game developers. Oasis provide high-speed transaction and zero gas fee for gamers. Because Oasis is EVM compatible and double-layered architecture for gaming. We started February last year and raised after 6 months. So we launched our mainnet and token and ecosystem after 6 months from the fundraise. And we have announced the 31 games and covered almost all genre of games and optimizing everything for games. Today, we announced both ecosystem and new games and platform for big names from all over the world. Then let me say thank you, and please enjoy tonight the Oasis special event. Thank you.
Thank you so much. ありがとうございます. Next, please take a look at the video messages from Taira Masaaki of the Liberal Democratic Party.
皆さんこんばんは。衆議院議員の平正明です。この度は IVS クリプト2023開催誠におめでとうございます。私は自由民主党の Web3 プロジェクトチームの座長として、昨年そして今年とですね、政策提言であるホワイトペーパーをまとめてまいりました。この Web3 を取り巻く環境は、世界的にも規制強化一辺倒という今状態にあり、いわゆるクリプトウィンターとも言われているところであります。一方でですね、今の日本は世界 からですね、ある意味注目を集めているわけでありまして、それはですね、例えばアメリカでは大きな暗号資産の取引所が破綻をしたわけでありますが、日本においてはですね、監督官庁がしっかり見ていて、そして、おそらくでありますけれども、世界で一番安全な取引所ということに、日本の取引所はなっているんだろうというふうに思います。また、ボラティリティの高い暗号資産の中で、今まさにステーブルコインといったものがですね、日本で法制化をされて、いわゆるメガバンクとその協力の会社からですね、発行されるということになっています。これもですね、日本初の大きな動きだというふうに思っております。さらには、地方創生×ウェブ3、これは世界でも特筆すべきですね、日本独特の動きだと思いますが、地域経済を活性化するためにですね、例えばふるさと納税に対して NFT を発行する、そのことによってですね、地域を活性化する、こういった取り組みが行われているところでもあります。さらにはですね、我々の PT ではですね、ブロックチェーンベースで動く新しい組織形態である DAO、これをですね、法制化をしたいという思いで、今、議員立法に向けて議論を加速をしているところでもあります。こういった環境の中でですね、今回、まさに日本が得意とするゲーム分野×ブロックチェーン×Web3 ということで、今回のイベントとなっているというふうにお伺いをしておりますが、ゲーム業界もまさに世界で日本が引っ張ってきた、さらには様々なですね、キャラクターもあるわけであります。このゲーム業界で培ってきた人材、またノウハウ、キャラクター、またストーリー展開、こういったものがですね、Web3 で新たなそのトークンエコノミーをビルトインして経済圏になっていくということだろうというふうに思います。ぜひ今回のカンファレンスを通して、日本また世界の人たちと一緒に手を携えてですね、世界中から愛されるゲームが生まれること、またいわゆる経済圏として発展をされることをご懸念申し上げまして、私からのご挨拶とさせていただきます。ありがとうございました。
Thank you so much. Now let's move on to the presentations. The first presentation is from Double Jump Tokyo. Kanade Koketsu, please come to the stage.
Hello everyone. Having a great time? So I'm Kanade, product manager at Double Jump Tokyo. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce our new product, Oasis Passport. Oasis Passport is a wallet application specific for Oasis blockchain. As we envision a future where blockchain games becomes mass adopted, Oasis has already tackled some critical issues through its unique architecture. Zero gas fees, instant transactions, and as we all know, there will be exciting announcements coming from game giants today, which is super exciting. But we realize there is a missing piece for blockchain games true mass adopted, such as blockchain-specific terms and knowledges, the need to have a wallet before starting the game, and a little bit of complexity of crossing the verse when wanting to play multiple titles. I'm convinced that such barriers need to be eliminated. before Oasis can truly reach out to a new user base. That's exactly why we're developing Oasis Passport, specifically designed with BCG newcomers in mind. Our vision is to become the gateway to new gaming experience. We aim to create a product that will act as the primary access point to Oasis. Target users are gaming enthusiasts who may not have previously expressed interest in BCG or crypt assets. Some of them may not even be aware of these concepts right now. It means that we're targeting users who do not exist on Oasis yet. This is the clear value proposition of this product and the challenging point at the same time. However, we are strongly sure that our product will be what they want soon, because with new exciting AAA contents coming from excellent game developers, we expect to draw the new user base into the world of Oasis. So what we're trying to do is to have the best wallet ready to be provided as soon as they arrive. The main starting is the contents on Oasis, so our product is positioned as a support app to never lose a new user base and make it easier for them to start playing a game. In future, it will become the must-have app for every gameplay on Oasis as a de facto wallet. Oasis Passport is scheduled for pre-release in August and the full release by the end of this year. So thank you for all your time and attention. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the night.
Thank you so much. So next, Kentaro Nemoto from Sega, Hironobu Ueno from Double Jump Tokyo. Please come to the stage.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Hironobu Ueno, CEO of Double Jump Tokyo. Today, we are excited to announce the new blockchain game developed by Double Jump Tokyo under the license of Sega's IP, Sangokushi Taisen. We have Mr. Nemoto, who is Sega's producer for Sangokushi Taisen.
皆さんこんばんは。日本語で失礼いたします。三国志大戦のプロデューサーのセガの根本と申します。この場に参加することができて光栄に思います。
Could you briefly explain about 三国志大戦？
三国志大戦は、ゲームセンターで2005年から日本で稼働しているアーケードゲームです。三国志の世界をモチーフとして、このような武将カードですねを実際コントローラー代わりとして戦う1対1のオンライン対戦ゲームという形になっています。アジア地域でも展開したことがあるので、プレイしていただいた方がいらっしゃるかもしれませんね。はい。
Thank you. For the first time, we are excited to reveal the promo video for Sangokushi Taisen. Please check out the video. Thank you. The English title of the game would be Battle of Three Kingdoms. The logo is based on the Imperial Seal. One of the fascinating things about the game is the beautiful artwork, which will be NFTs in this game. These are new illustrations drawn by famous artists from left to right, Soso or Cao Cao. Ruby or Liu Bei, Song Ken or Sankui. I'm delighted these illustrations will become NFTs. Mr. Nemoto, what do you think?
いつも描いていただいているイラストレーターではあるんですけど、やっぱり新規イラストはかっこいいですね。チームのデザイナーもすごい喜んでました。
Oh, that's great to hear. Next, we will review the screen of the building deck building screen feature. One of the game's most unique features. Players will have only 3 minutes. To choose their strategies or generals, making the deck building gameplay both exciting and challenging. Here is a screenshot of the battle screen we are currently developing. After building your deck, the gameplay goes into auto battle mode. The original game was a real-time card game where players moved their cards to battle one another. However, in this game, the battle progresses automatically. Can everyone envision how the game will revived as a blockchain game? Mr. Nemoto, what do you think?
そうですね。三国志大戦のエッセンスが感じられつつも、カジュアルな、遊びやすいゲームになりそうだなっていう予感がしました。この機会にファンの方も、ブロックチェーンゲームに、触っていただけるよう